Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. Third day of the Hawaii Expo here in Honolulu. Thanks for coming out on a Sunday afternoon. My name is Jaclyn Moore. I'm first and foremost a pharmacist from the Big Island. Been there about 20 years now practicing in community pharmacy before I had the unbelievable opportunity and pleasure to transition over to the medical cannabis industry. And I'm with Big Island Grown, rooted in Pepe'ekeo. We operate three retail locations, 2 production centers. I'm here really to share what I've learned being a student of the legislative process here, trying to get laws and bills passed. So this is purely educational from my part. And with that, I'd love to hand it over to Cedric to introduce himself.
Hello, my kako. Hello. My name is Cedric Aswinga Gates. I am born and raised on the west side in Makaha. I've served in the legislature for 8 years, from 2016 to 2024. Most recently, I chaired the Committee on Agriculture and led the cause to try to get cannabis legalization through the legislature in both 2023 and 2024. We were able to, I guess, get to a point where we're having real conversations about legalization now. And now I'm on the other side, which I'm here as a disclaimer. I'm here as an individual and as a former legislator. But it's truly exciting to be here with Jack to talk about how we can all work together for the common goal of creating a safer Hawaii in terms of the usage of cannabis and for our consumers. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. So this illustration here, by the way, I want to start off by saying the Legislative Reference Bureau is an excellent resource. It's chock full of information, a guide through the legislative process. There are how-to videos posted, and it also provides helpful tips for testimony, how to testify, how to even go out and find your legislator, and how to start that conversation. So this is from their website.
Yes, and just to add on to that, the legislature has a public access room, which I believe if you're involved in trying to do anything to pass legislation or just advocate, to use that room because it's like the public's own office space. You can go in there, use a computer, print out paperwork, write your testimony right there and submit it. So to Jack's point, using the public resources for our best interests.
Thank you. So this looks like a very complicated illustration, but this is the most simplified version that sums up the process here in the state of Hawaii. This is the legislative process, okay? What we look to achieve with you all today is to share a little bit about the process, enough where you know where to go to find further resources and to get more information to get involved, whether it's applied to cannabis or any other aspect of being here and living here that is important to you. I think if we can help demystify and somebody walks away, hopefully all of you, with a sense of how to do this on your own for whatever you're really passionate and committed to, that would be a success for us, right, Fetty?
Yes, and just to read the room real quick, if by a raise of hands, how many of you have actually testified at either the state legislature, city council, any board meetings? Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is the bill or journey of a bill. And it all starts with really the legislature. So going back and starting from high level, you have the 3 branches of government, and one of them here at the legislature, they are primarily responsible for really crafting, amending, repealing laws here. The judicial branch are responsible for interpreting the laws, and then the executive branch is responsible for implementation and enforcement of the laws. So it's amazing to have Seti here as a former representative, because what we also want to achieve is you all walk away understanding when a lawmaker is sitting on a committee at a hearing, at a public hearing, how are they taking in the information? What insights can SETI provide to all of us for how to be very clear and concise, or however we need to package it up to really be heard? So that's also an incredible opportunity I think we'll be able to dive down. As we start off with the bill, can you start talking about how somebody engages with your office? If somebody feels strongly about something and they go ahead and they find their lawmaker, their legislator, what's the first step?
Yeah, so the first step is obviously trying to get in contact with your legislator. If you have an idea that you want to see pushed through, reaching out to the area representative or senator that lives in your district, because that's their constitutional duty, is to serve you as their constituent. So reaching out to them, sharing them with your ideas of what you hope to achieve, and then what you want them to do is submit a bill on your behalf to be drafted. And then once they give you back that bill, you can look at it, see if it includes the things that you wanted to include and the intent of the bill that you're trying to introduce. From there, if it's not, you can make amendments. And if it is, they can go ahead and move forward with getting signatures to submit your bill on your behalf. So that's a cool part of working directly with your legislator to get what you believe is best for the community or the state.
So what I'm hearing is that the first step is contacting your legislator, because it sounds like they're wonderfully supportive on the other side and are doing the legwork to take in what you're saying, what your concerns are, and then running it through the channels to actually produce language that is viable, would make for a viable bill. Is that a fair statement?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, and you can reach out to your legislators by email, phone call, or in person. Those are the obvious three ways that you can reach out, or attend a neighborhood board meeting or a town hall that they're hosting to really try to get in front of them and get your 5 minutes to give them an elevator speech.
Okay, so 5-minute elevator speech. Clearly not all of the requests or inquiries translate to a bill. So what is compelling enough from a lawmaker's perspective? And I know it's different for different folks. There's different neighborhoods and districts that have certain set of concerns that maybe are more prioritized than others. But can you give us a little bit of insight? If somebody, doesn't seem to get to the point where it translates to a bill, you don't give up. So you just continue. If you're passionate, just continue your session after session.
So great question. There's two options. You can either try to get them to introduce the bill. If the bill is not feasible, if the bill is like missing some major key pieces for it to actually be implementable, what you can do is turn it into a resolution. And a resolution is a different form of legislation that allows you to share your intent and urge, say, if you're trying to get Department of Health to do better testing on cannabis, you can introduce a resolution that urges Department of Health to do better testing on cannabis. It's not going to hold their feet to the fire by law or mandate, but it's our way of nudging the departments do what the community is asking them to do. And so that we have it on writing and record to say, hey, this is how the legislature feels about this particular issue, even though we don't pass a law that would change state statute.
Thank you, that makes sense. So resolution really is just to put it on public record. It's translating your feedback, concerns into something real, even if it doesn't turn out to be a bill.
Correct.
Okay. So what I thought was interesting is, over the years, I went back to 2010, and year after year, session after session, there's anywhere between 3,000 and 6,500 bills that are introduced. And what I found very interesting is by the end of this gauntlet right here, you're lucky if 10 to 15% make it out to the other side. So one of the things that was really interesting is, this whole process requires, zoom in, sorry. Okay. This whole process requires advocacy at almost every point, okay? Not that I want it to be daunting for anybody. When you see this and you're like, wow, I have to be active, this is a full-time job. yeah, you have to really care about something, distill down what you're trying to achieve. And if it's just one thing that you follow through to the end during one legislative session, then you start building on that, is what I would say. That's what I've learned, just to like focus on one or two key things that you really care about having some participation with during the session. So the other thing that I was learning is that during this process, you know, this whole process is jam-packed from relatively short period of time.
January to May.
Yep. So January to May, and there's deadlines. So there's a timeline that breaks down when the last day is to be a bill to be introduced in the House, when the last day is to get referred to a committee. So you really do have to be engaged, and there is a way, and there are resources to show you how to do that. So we'll put a handout together if you like, but at the end of this, you could put in on the Capitol website for the legislature, you can track measures and track bills. And maybe towards the end, if you want to get into that level, we can kind of walk through how to do that. But it's a wonderful way to just stay informed without having to watch every moment.
Let's run through this
Okay.
and then pull up the Capitol website.
Perfect. Okay, good. Excellent. So can we start off? Bill gets introduced. Okay, you finally have your concerns, your feedback, whatever you're looking to achieve. You find someone who's willing to help you write it, one of the lawmakers, and then it gets introduced.
Yes.
Okay, can you walk us through the process then, and what is it that we need to know? What should the takeaways be for us, and how to engage during that time?
Okay, I
Thank
can
you.
definitely do that. Using the handout you have up here. So as we see the idea, you are the idea. You come up with the idea. You hand it to a senator or a House representative. The left side is the House and right side is the Senate. They introduce the bill with the clerk's office, which is our form of like administration. So we give it to them. They go ahead and insert it into a digital format so that it can be uploaded so the public can have access to the bill itself. Once that happens, it then gets set up for first reading, and first reading is when both chambers, both the House chamber and the Senate chamber, go downstairs in the big room and they go and meet to pass all of the bills that have been introduced for a first reading, saying that this is official legislation. It's going to now get referred to the committees. So what happens is that after it passes the full first vote on the House and Senate floor, both leaderships on Senate and House side, they get together and they say, what referrals are we going to give these bills that are now being introduced? So we have all these different committees. Like I said, I was the chairman of the Agriculture Committee. So, for example, with cannabis, it came down to Judiciary and Agriculture, Consumer Protection, and Finance. That was the 4 committees. And so the leadership refers it to the committees, so now we know what chairs are going to have to hear the bills. So after that happens with referring the bills to the committees, now what happens is a chair has to create an agenda, an official agenda, to put these bills for conversation to be discussed and passed out of their committees. That's a crucial part because you can introduce the bill, but if the chair just is not filling your bill or just has concerns about it, they will likely not hear the bill. And if you don't even get a hearing for a bill, then the bill's dead. It's just paperwork at that point. So once you put it into to motion and the chair actually wants to hear your bill, they'll produce an agenda that will be put out to the public for our consumption. And once that happens, that's when you come in. Because now the bill is getting a hearing, you need to provide the gasoline to keep that vehicle, which we call bills, moving throughout the legislature. And you guys are the gasoline. So when you guys come down to the legislature and says, this bill is super important to us, here's why, and we're talking about being constructive and concise, I would say, legislators, as a former legislator, you have thousands of bills coming past your desk. You have thousands of things to read. So keeping it in like a bullet point format, very simple, easy to read and digest, is obviously going to be your best way to actually cut through the noise, because you give me a 5-page letter telling me why this bill is so important, the likeliness of me reading that goes significantly down. I may skim through it, but I'm not going to really be able to absorb all the information. So that's a lot of how the chairs work. So in terms of what your testimony should reflect, it should be short, sweet, and simple. And that way, and then the biggest part is if you're a constituent of the legislator, making sure you put your home address so that they know you're a constituent in their district and they need to take your testimony seriously. Because that's another part of it too. When you have testimony coming in from all neighbor islands and it's only Oahu people reading it, you know, the way it hits, it doesn't hit the same. So and that's one thing, like for Big Island, exactly. You know, having a lot of the Big Island people reaching out to the Big Island legislators, because they can put pressure on the chairs too. Like, hey, my constituents reached out for this, and they believe this is an important bill, so we got to make sure we have some conversation about what we're going to do with it. And then I'll stop there and let you kind of chime in a little bit.
Excellent information. Okay, so the first thing is, it sounds like, if you can confirm, every bill that gets introduced will pass the first reading, right?
Correct.
Okay, so what I found during the process, I'm trying to figure out how to best explain this because it is a cumbersome process, right? So 30,000 feet up, in order for a bill to become a law, it requires 3 votes, okay? And when you see reading, first reading, second reading, third reading, those are the 3 votes that are required in order for it to ever be enacted. So the first reading, usually pass, vote yes. Okay, then you go to the committees.
Correct.
Do you mind talking a little bit about really the power that the chair has of these various committees? So let's just assume, because we'll get there at some point, that you're dialed in, you put in your measures, so you're tracking what you really care about. You're starting to understand when you see on the schedule, first reading, refer to committees. We're kind of breaking down what the anatomy of the bill is. So when you're looking at this, you're like, oh, I remember that. That's what this means. When you get to the committees, there's the timeline triggers certain things based on how many committees a bill is referred to, right? So it could have a very simple path or a more complex path, okay? Mm-hmm. But what could people do if they see that their bill has been referred but not yet scheduled? And can you also talk about really the power of the chair of that committee? Thank you.
So, like I said, once your bill is past first reading, it gets referred to the committees. Committees have to schedule the hearing. If the hearing hasn't been filed, because there's deadlines, there's first lateral, second lateral, third lateral. It's basically mimicking first reading, second reading, third reading. So the same steps that happen after first reading has to you have to do it one more time. So it goes to second reading, the whole House passes the bill again, or the whole Senate passes the bill. Now it's referred to the next committee because it passed the first committee. So for example, Cannabis, Ag, Consumer Protection, Finance. So once it passed Ag Committee, it has to go through a second reading of the full House. It passed the second reading. Now the next committee is Consumer Protection. Consumer Protection has to then file a hearing notice saying that they're going to hear that bill that Ag just passed out, and then it repeats to the third reading, which would be Finance. So Finance, after Consumer Protection passes it out, they have to agree, okay, we're going to hear this bill and pass it through. So then once the last committee hears it, it goes in for the third reading, which will, once we pass the third reading, we pass it over to the Senate. Then the Senate does the same process the House did.
That's why there's parallel lines right here. So once you get through this gauntlet, and if you're lucky enough at that point that you're still engaged and you're like, it's almost like betting on horses, right? You're like, you're watching it, right? You want to see it to the end. But you get to a point where it crosses over and it has to go through the entire process again, okay? So in a relatively short period of time. So this won't take up a year of your life.
From January to May.
January to May, you have to be really, really engaged. Chairs, okay.
Yeah.
Now, it could get referred to their committee. It doesn't have to be scheduled for the committee. I understand there are thousands of bills and only so many make it out, but they have an incredible amount of power to schedule a public hearing for a bill.
Mhm.
And I guess my question to you is, I understand people are elected because people find similar value systems in the person, hopefully, that you're voting for. Also, hopefully, there's some alignment for values of they're speaking on your behalf, right? And you really want them to be able to do that. But the question is, before they schedule, is it because they don't? I'm going to use cannabis as an example. HB 1246. Okay. If somebody feels strongly about cannabis because they're not there yet, will they schedule it so that it gets a fair shake in the democratic process?
That's a good question. I mean, there's many excuses you can give to why you aren't going to hear a bill. You just hope that they're valid reasons more than excuses. As a chair, obviously, there's been bills that, talking with the departments who have to actually implement the bills, when they start giving opposition to doing something, a lot of times that will kill a bill because, for example, if which DOA isn't coming out in opposition, I don't believe, Department of Ag doesn't want to implement allowing, patients to have cannabis. That would then create an uphill battle within the department because even though you get it passed now, the actual implementation of it is going to lag because people at the department of whatever it is, they're not going to do their job to get it done. So you got twofold issue with that. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of bills will not get heard or killed is because these departments are just adamant that they're not going to do it. So we don't want to have to deal with that. Another reason could be that, like you said, the legislator who's the chair of the committee has difference of opinion when it comes to an issue like cannabis, for example. And that can be enough to kill the bill. But what happens a lot of times is that there's 51 members in the House, 25 members in the Senate. Out of those 25, the 51, 30 members support cannabis and 21 oppose it. So when that chair is trying to not hear the bill, you got 30 people saying, actually, we need you to hear the bill because majority rules at the end of the day. You need 26 votes to pass anything in the House and 13 votes for anything in the Senate. So if you got that number, you can literally overthrow the whole regime that's currently in place. So that's kind of how the process works. You can change the speaker, you can change the Senate president, you can change all the committee chairs with those votes. So that's why people have to walk lightly when it comes to that, because if 30 members are saying, chair, you need to hear this, but he doesn't want to hear it, now we have 30 votes to take him out and basically remove them as chair of whatever committee they're not hearing the bill. So that's the risk they run by trying to hardline and stand in the way. So that's just one couple examples. But then again, with the chair, it's their prerogative because they've been selected by the leadership to be the chair of whatever committee. So they're trying to give them the leeway to lead, but at the same time, some people need to get pulled back into the fold so that they align with the majority.
Okay, great. So, excellent information, Cedric. Thank you. I hope you are all getting something from the conversation so far. So we want to go in a little bit. We want to go in a little bit deeper. When somebody does contact you, okay, people feel very passionately. So when you said before, somebody writing 5 pages and submitting it in, what I just want to acknowledge for those of us that are doing that or have done that is I really think that's a necessary part of the process, because what you're able to do at that point is start to distill down the points with as few words as you can to express how you feel about something. And I just feel like it's a necessary process to understand why you feel the way you feel about it. And so bullet points I like, but you almost have to sit with it there for a minute, right?
Yeah, for sure.
When somebody is wants to engage, but they're not ready for testimony, because testimony can be very overwhelming. Okay, if anyone has gotten to the point where you've signed up because you're like, okay, I got to create a login, I got to figure out this website, because at first glance it doesn't, could be overwhelming, right? And then you realize that it's a pretty good solid website. Testimony can be a lot. So when somebody just says support or oppose, does that hit the same way versus having someone who's saying something? Sometimes it's like, somebody could say, should I even bother? Should I even bother just saying support or oppose? Or is it really necessary to have that qualified by some kind of statement?
Definitely having an elevator speech of why you want something done is your best option, especially if you're passionate about the issue. Another thing I would mention, just in terms of testimony, is trying to do the back end work. Start with, again, getting in front of your legislator, getting in front of maybe the chair before the meeting, because that honestly helps a lot too. I think that's the difference between working on a bill and just trying to like hope for the best and wish everything lines up the way it should. Because when you meet with on the back end, before you even get to the committee, the chair or the rep that represents you can already understand your reasoning behind your support. And then at that point, you're just urging them to either make the amendments to the bill that you want or just passing it out as the bill currently is formed. So there's that aspect that I want to mention too, is try to do that back end work, because that's the most impactful.
Excellent. I guess at some point when you've done that and you feel like you still want to chase after it, maybe that's where you amplify the message by connecting with people that also feel the same way about it. And then in some kind of coordinated effort, just kind of reaching out and expressing your thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, we're in the age of social media, so social media is also a powerful tool to get the conversation going in the way that we need it to be. For example, last year there was just a whole effort in the media to dismantle the cannabis legislation, whether it was from, influential figures in the community, law enforcement, all of these different folks really controlled the narrative. And that was the difference, because we did our best, I think, with trying to get people to see the perspective of why legalization is important. But if we're not controlling the narrative on how this is going to benefit our communities, how this is going to help with the economic issues that we face here in Hawaii with just relying on tourism, if we're not talking in on those key points of why things need to change, then the other side will obviously always win, because that's what's driving the legislature as well, is the commentary outside of the legislature and what's being said in the communities, and how is that going to reflect in their elections, and all of those kind of stuff starts getting calculated when those big pushes start happening. So in terms of just bringing it down to the micro level, that's where community is important to come in, because if, say for example, I'm representing the West Side, I know for a fact a lot of people from my community have brought up to me legalize cannabis. So there's not even a thought in my mind that there's support there. But in other communities, that may not be the same case, right? So having those voices elevate the needs and the cause is so important.
Thank you, Seti. So when you look at cannabis, the legislation in previous years, first, can we just take a moment? I think we should acknowledge the champions for both the MedCan program and also the folks that at the legislature who have really year after year done their best to continue the dialogue and conversation about what an adult use / dual use industry here could look like. So in this particular case, you've always been a wonderful champion. And I want to really acknowledge Representative, yes, he's been a champion. Thank you, Seti. And also Representative Tarnas, I can tell you he really engaged with everyone that he could It's a very comprehensive bill, HB 1246. It's a lot to get through, but if you really focus again and distill down what you really care about, look at those sections of the bill. And I think this is where we could rally together and know that we have future fights in the next legislative session. But philosophically, at this point, we're either going to want this together or it's just going to die again. Because every time we're not unified saying this, it's a reason why not to pass it. And, hopefully this is the year where we can rally. So I would like to talk about viable vehicles because of the number of bills that make it through. There's a lot of folks that oppose, but how can you talk through like the methodology of opposing versus comments or supporting with amendments? Like if there's a vehicle, even though it's not perfect, even though there might be things about it that you just don't agree with, how can somebody engage constructively to maybe help use the current vehicle that's there and kind of steer it the way they would like to see it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely believe there's power in numbers. So the more people that you can kind of rally with you, whether it's a petition, a change.org petition saying that this would be something you would want to see in the bill, and 5,000 people or 500 people sign on to it. That's obviously a powerful tool. I've seen people use that type of format to then print out 100 copies of the different people's names. So you get 100 people to sign the petition, and on that petition you print out 100 copies with each different name, and then you go hand it over to the chair and say, this is how much people is supporting these amendments. That's something as a chair I would consider to be valid and something I would seriously need to consider, because that's something that you want to make sure is known on the platform. Obviously, offering comments is just kind of your opinion, and then the support with the amendments are obviously the push that I said, having a large number of folks who agree with that amendment, and then that can stand against the Department of Ag, the Department of Health, all these people that are going to be testifying or offering comments.
Okay, so when somebody's drafting and you want to be concise for testimony, let's say they're advocating for something, but they also have some real issues with some of the parts or provisions of the bill. Is it enough where they're communicating their concerns and why, or are you folks looking for the next step, which is solutions, like suggested language, like what?
Yeah, suggested language is always welcome, because it makes our job as legislators easy. To be able to just grab language and insert it into the bill that's going to make you happy. Because if we try to grasp what you're trying to do, but really don't articulate it in a way that represents what you wanted to do, then you end up in a catch-22, because you're not actually doing what you wanted, but we also have done the work to try to give you a best solution for it.
Yeah.
But that all kind of goes around and it gets mixed into the whole process of because as a legislator too, you have to do your homework, right? If you're not going to do your homework and you just come and take a bill and you don't go and reference everything listed in the bill and go look at what the statute says, all of these different things that you have to be able to know when it comes down to moving the bill as a chair. Because you don't want to pass a bill and it's a bad bill, and then the next chair is like, why the heck did this guy pass this bill to me? Like, there's all these flaws in it, and the departments are pissed at it, so I'm probably going to kill it now because I don't want to deal with that mess. That first chair should have did their homework and came with a better bill. And that's kind of how a lot of bills end up dying too. But with cannabis right now, this bill is probably the best bill in the nation, I think, given that so much homework has been done on it. And when we did the last big push last year, we were able to get a lot of feedback to help incorporate into the new bill that's currently being proposed from the House side. And so we'll see what happens.
Excellent. And yes, I agree. And for a moment, I want to take this because this is different than last year's bill. There's a lot of key components from the bill that was submitted last year. But again, this has been years in the making to get to this point of refinement and finally seeing the HB 1246 in its current form. What are we likely to see with this bill this session? I know it's gotten scheduled. It's going to go through double committee hearing, Ag and Judiciary on Tuesday. Another note for testimony, if you want it to be counted towards decision making, it should be received before 24 hours. So don't wait for the last minute is the point. You should still submit. It's never too late. Just get it out there for public record. But can you tell us what you're seeing or what your prediction is?
I think it still has some uphill battles. Obviously, just the way the legislature is structured now. On the Senate side, obviously, they're ready to move it. They've passed it out multiple times in the past 5 years to legalize, and it always got killed inside of the House of Representatives. But that was under a former speaker. Now we have a new speaker who is, I want to say, more friendly to the industry and to the possibilities of what can come out of this, and also understands that without any regulatory framework, that the black market is just going to continue to persist. And the biggest issue is that's being brought up against from all of the opponents of the bill is that it's going to increase youth usage. Mm-hmm. And it's just obvious that they don't understand that a well-regulated market is the answer to that. Rather than trying to piecemeal these decriminalization, and then under federal law, all these THCAs and all of these different strains of cannabis and genetics are now legal under federal law. So you have all these kiosks, and they're not checking ID. They're not required to check ID. So now that's obviously a big issue, because if a kid can come there and maybe, these 15-year-olds be having full beards just like me and looking like adults, if they can just walk in there and pick that out now, that's a big issue for how we address those concerns. So you try to figure out how to connect the concerns that people are having with something in the bill that will address those concerns, and try to look at ways that you can relate it to the communities that they're representing. And I think that's where some people on the fence need a lot of that support from their community, to let them know and reassure them that my position on this can change, because they're not going to get crucified in the community for voting yes on it. And I think that's where a lot of people in the House have been getting caught in that crossfire. And for me, though, it comes down, I've never been about self-preservation in my job. It's more about get the job done, get in, get out, and move on with my life. And I think that a lot more people have to come with that same attitude. It's like, you got to do what's right for the state of Hawaii, even if your community can't necessarily see what you're doing it for. And you got to die on that sword sometimes, because that's the only way that things are going to start moving in the direction we need them to. If we're all going to be scared of our elections, to vote a certain way, to act a certain way, to do what's right for the community, then we're going to end up in this revolving door where nothing gets done. Everybody's mad. The legislature's mad because we're not doing what we need to do. The community is mad because they're not seeing the results that they want. And it's just a lose-lose situation. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Seti. Really wonderful insight. So I just want to take note of the time and make sure we have plenty of time to engage and make sure we can answer any questions you have. In fact, that might be able to direct the next little bit of time we have for where we go.
The website?
Sure.
And I was just asking.
No internet.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe you can connect to my Wi-Fi.
Well, you know what it is.
What?
My husband might be texting.
Okay, I got you. I see. So one of the things that I want everyone to do, if you can, you have a phone, just go to the capital.hawaii.gov website and just save it as a bookmark. And now you'll have that forever on your phone to type in a keyword to look up what we're doing on cannabis or healthcare or housing, all of these different things. You can just type in, see what's being introduced. And then on that website, There's just a list of hearings you can click on for all the hearings. You can check what your legislator is introducing. So that's a cool thing to do too with reports. So it'll compile all of the reports for everybody's bills that they introduce. So if you live in Pearl City, you can go look up your Pearl City rep and every bill that he introduced this session, so you can know what ideas they're pushing out in the universe. And then you can track the bills, like Jackie was saying, and then testifying. So everything's online. And then now with since COVID, we've offered the Zoom option. So you can now zoom into the meetings, which is a game changer, and allows for you to still be active without giving up your whole day being at the legislature. So.
And I just wanted to extend myself as a resource. So after this, if anyone wants, I can help walk through like how to, develop, go on, log on, and kind of navigate through. If anybody's interested in that, so because it's a lot to take in just verbally. Yeah, actually, so let's just wrap up this part.
Okay.
But so after the third reading, it goes to conference committee only if after the House and the Senate, if there's a disagreement in language. So if it goes through one chamber, it crosses over, goes into the next chamber and makes it through. If the language is completely the same, then there's no issues. Well, I shouldn't say that at that point. But if there's a difference in language, they have to literally negotiate it during conference committee. And this is where I've seen a lot of bills just die in the pasture. You never know why. It's public, but there's no testimony here. And it's just literally the House members and the senators kind of thrashing through the final language. If that does make it through that process, they go back to their respective chamber floors for the fourth vote. So a fourth vote is not required to be for a bill to become a law unless it goes through conference committee, correct? And so after that, once we get the floor votes, then it goes to the Gov's office on his desk, and he could either sign it and it becomes law. He could veto it and it's just done. And at that point, you can pass it or have it overridden if you have 2/3 vote in both chambers. I don't know when that's happened anytime. I don't have an example to cite. But the other option is he doesn't veto and he doesn't sign, and it becomes law when you see that date, the effective date. So that's the full process. So we'd love to open it up for questions if anyone has anything. Please, sir.
About contacting committee chairs who may not represent us directly. How effective is, what should I do? I remember hearing that the finance committee chair is sort of an opponent, but he's based on the Big Island, and I'm like, well,
Maui.
is he gonna listen to me? Yeah.
You have your representative reach out to them because that's their peers, right? So they can go and talk directly to them, whether it's walking in their office or at a committee hearing. They can get up to them right in their ear and be whispering what you want them to say. So that's something to definitely think about when trying to reach those people that may not represent you specifically.
That's a great question. Yes, sir.
I had a couple of questions, but I'm in Hawaii, so I just got a flyer from Gene Ward.
Oh, yeah.
And so on it, he did a little survey, and he
Yeah.
asked, if you were into legalization of cannabis. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and send this in and see, but do senators and legislators take calls?
Yes, they do take calls. You most likely will have to schedule a call though, because we just have busy days. Honestly, some days I work from 7 to 9 to 10 p.m. and you just running. So unless it's on my calendar, it's usually booked. So I don't have any free time to really actually do a call. So that's why it's always good to call with their office and talk to their secretaries or office managers and ask them to schedule a call with the rep. And generally, if anybody called me, I would happily take a call because that is with my job. And obviously, I like talking to my constituents.
So along those lines, do you know Gene Ward's position?
Yes, he actually introduced a bill this year to take it to a vote. So he wants to put it on the ballot for 2026. When elections are up, it's going to be on the ballot. The other part of it, you kind of can tell if the bill's going to move based on the author. The minority is the minority, so they're gonna end up not really moving through the legislature. They're gonna find somebody in the majority's bill to try to make that the vehicle. So it's good to see that he's actually introducing that, because it at least softens the Republican stance on cannabis, which is helpful because we need those votes too. Right now, I would probably, if I could guess, it's probably like 27, 28 to maybe 30, 31, 4. So it's tight. So you want to kind of try to expand that out. And if you can get the Republicans on that side, then it makes for an easy passage.
And then the final thing is, where is the 1246 bill in this process?
It's going to it just passed first reading. First reading, now it's at committee hearings. And committee hearings is on Tuesday.
Tuesday, the first committee hearing. It's a double committee. And that's counted as one hearing, so it's ag and judiciary. So it'll be Representative Kahaloa, who's very supportive as chair, and then also Representative Tarnas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So can you just clear up real quick, Ms. Empress? Well, just on the topic of ballots, right? Because a lot of people are like, why don't you just put it on the ballot? Why can't we all just vote for it? You can only put it on a ballot through the legislative process, right? If you want to change the Hawaii state constitution. Otherwise, the ballot is not an option. Is that correct?
Correct.
I just want to clear that up because I know.
So yeah, legalization of cannabis would be in our state constitution if it went to a CONAMP vote, which is a constitutional amendment vote. I think that's a great option and alternative to legalization, but the part about HB 1246 is that it creates the framework for how to execute this effectively and in the best interest of our communities. A lot of times what we see in the free market is just everything is everything and you can do whatever you kind of want, sell out your house, whatever the case may be. And I feel like we kind of want to have that oversight to an extent that we are looking out for our consumers. And that's what I've always said why we need this more than ever, is because right now, if you're just buying from some random person on the street, you don't have the testing that a dispensary has. You don't have the oversight, checks and balances to make sure that there's no pesticides and all of these things in your products. And for me, that's my biggest concern, because, if you're desperate and you're buying off the streets, you don't know that cannabis could kill you. And then it's a cannabis related death. Now it drives down the whole conversation of where cannabis should be as a safe alternative to alcohol and other things that humans use to relax and medicate.
Thank you, Seti.
Go
Ms.
ahead.
Empress.
Hey, thank you very much to both for doing this presentation, and I apologize, I did not get a senator or?
No, so I am a private citizen now.
Oh.
Yes.
You were-
I was a representative for 8 years. Yes.
You made several statements, which I noted, that you're asking the public for them to engage. You said engage the legislators from the back door. Someone who lives on the Big Island, that I've tried numerous times to engage my Senator for Puna, Senator Buenaventura, as well as Rep. Gregor Iligan. Much to their credit, they have finally caught up with me. But it's taken years to do that, years of phone calls, emails, I don't know what other channels, right, that can be done. You also said that you're asking for the people, I guess. You're asking for testimony from voters, right, from community people who are medical patient or people who want to see the legalization of cannabis for adult use. So you also ask for suggested language, right? In this bill, the first thing I want to ask is, why does the bill have to be 300 pages? Why could these regulations or whatever is being formulated be simplified at maybe 10 pages, even 3. The next one is the suggested language that you're asking for in people's testimony, right? So one of the suggested language that I don't see in this current 1246 or any of your bills is language that addresses reparatory and restorative justice measures for people who have been adversely impacted by green harvest or the Hawaii's war on drugs. I understand that the governor has an expungement program, for example, but the quantity for possession really is just like it negates reparatory justice measures for people like the OGs, the ganja war veterans, people who were fined for large amounts of cannabis for cultivating it. Where is the language that addresses reparatory measures for these people and families that were impacted from the stigma and the criminalization of ganja growers? And finally, you said that as legislators, you have a responsibility to do your homework. So my question is, for the people who put together those bills, what sort of research have these legislators done to determine the regulatory framework for this bill, particularly when you're talking about possession, who is to possess, who is to be licensed, how they should be licensed, and so on. What research have you done, and how are these individuals framing these laws? What is their background with cannabis history, its cultural history, its traditional history, its medicinal history, and everything that can help you frame, like, let's say, legislation. And don't get me wrong, I am for some regulations, but the regulations have to be equitable, sustainable, and not those that will criminalize a particular group while allowing another group to profit from commodifying cannabis.
Thank you for that. Great questions. I'll try to tackle as much questions as I can in the time frame we have. Regarding the first question about how meeting with your legislators and trying to get in front of them, you know, it's a tough sell for me to try to justify why they have taken so long to get to you. I don't know. That's obviously within their issues. I don't know. I can't speak to that in particular. But what I can see, obviously going to their office is one of the big ways. I know Rep. Ilagan personally, he does a bunch of town halls. I think he does like a plethora of town halls actually. So trying to catch him at the town halls is always a good one. Or catch them in the grocery store like they always do to me at Tamura's or Wine store when I was representing that area.
That's exactly how I was able to with Brett Illigan after 5 years, after 2 years, and with Senator Buenaventura, my first actual contact with her has been right here at the White Campus.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So.
Okay, and I
That's excellent.
numerous times tried to engage.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry that's your experience. I wish that there will be better experiences moving forward for you. And if there's anything I can do to assist with that, I'll do my best. And in terms of just doing the homework, there's been a task force within the legislature made up of the Attorney General, departments, legislators, and they've been doing a bunch of visits across the nation to see all these different operations that are currently going underway in the legalization market. And they've kind of compiled all of that and tried to come up with the best standards to use to create our program. And I'm disappointed. I think there is some type of fostering participation from the disadvantaged communities portion inside of this bill. In previous measures, we've made sure that we've included ways that we can provide capital and resources for those people who have been impacted by the war on cannabis or the green harvest, whatever that they've been experiencing, that led them to incarceration, to try to get them inside of the fold day one, because we believe that that's only appropriate for them. I'm not in the legislature now, so I don't necessarily have the same control over the legislation as we used to. And then on the homework side of it, and the best practices part of it, they're trying to do their best. One thing that I would love to say is that not only can the legislature pass legislation, but we can repeal and amend legislation as well. That means after we pass this legislation, we can change this legislation upside on its head, or we can improve it to make it work better for the community after it's being implemented. But at the same time, I feel like we have to get through the door. We've been arguing with each other outside the door this whole time, and we haven't got our foot inside the door. So until we get our foot inside the door, all of those amendments, things that you want to change, is less likely to happen. The more likely we pass it, the more tweaks we can make once it passes. It's got to get over that biggest hurdle first.
Empress, what a fully loaded, beautiful statement and question to kind of tie this out. Looks like we have another question in the audience, or a couple few.
And this will be the last question.
Okay, and then we'll linger afterwards so we can connect with.
This is a quick question.
Yeah.
So is green harvest done? Is there no more green harvest, or do they still go out and
Well,
check on people? What does that work?
We're not seeing enforcement. This is just doesn't seem like it's a priority. So I don't,
That's, really
I hear helicopters, but it's Blue Hawaiian going over Akaka Falls. So I don't, I'm not here, but I'm also not rooted in Puna. So,
yeah. So with that whole issue, that was an initiative, obviously, to try to crack down on cannabis, which ended up spurring the meth epidemic and everything else that we've seen since. But now, we've talked about, all of these kiosks operating throughout the state, where they're just selling these THC derivatives. I think I said
you got it,
derivatives. Sorry,
It'll flow.
long morning. That is where they're at. They're more so focused on the hardcore drugs, fentanyl, meth, and heroin. So there's that in terms of the war on drugs still happening in Hawaii right now.
Thank you. So I hope everyone just has maybe a nugget or two where you feel better equipped to be an ally to the movement, because I really believe that's what it's going to take. Seti's been amazing. Thank you so much for the insight and for sharing with everyone. And also thank you everyone for the time. It's been a pleasure. And so thank you.
Thank you. Aloha.